Hey, you guys, welcome back to the salon and happy holidays. So, I talked about Rankin Bass Productions not too long ago when I was discussing their kind of somewhat lesser known stop motion animation film, Mad Monster Party, which, if you remember, I put that up a few weeks ago. But watching that movie made me all nostalgic for the stop motion specials that aired around Christmas time in the 1970s, which are probably the thing they're best known for. And, because those specials formed a large part of my holiday experiences growing up, probably people that are the same age as me or maybe a little bit older or younger, like probably have similar memories. So I figured, what the hell? Christmas is coming up. It's been a while since I had seen the specials, so I wanted to rewatch them and see if they still held up. Now, I'm going to note here that even though Rankin Bass did make, among many others, they made Frosty the Snowman, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, and The Stingiest Man in Town, which was a retelling of The Christmas Carol, which I also saw lots of times. Those were all traditional cell animation, so I thought to keep things more simple and have this video not be like 5 hours long, that I was going to stick with kind of like the three stop motion specials that I remembered the best from my childhood, which were Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer from 1964, Santa Claus is Coming to Town from 1970, and The Year Without a Santa Claus from 1974. So let's dive in and get Christmassy. Now, while it may be hard to believe, now that Rudolph is such a ubiquitous holiday character, he's really not all that traditional, like as far as holiday icons go. He was actually only invented in 1939 in a poem that was written by a man named Robert L. May. Now, it so happened that May's brother-in-law was a songwriter by the name of Johnny Marks, who, in spite of being Jewish, was actually best known for his Christmas songs, many of which have become holiday staples. He wrote Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree, A Holly Jolly Christmas, Silver and Gold, I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day. So, Marx actually turned his brother-in-law's poem into a song called Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, which came out in 1949, and obviously the rest is history. Now, honestly, until I started digging into the backstory of this animated special, by the way, I had no idea that all of those holiday songs were written by the same guy. So I have to admit that my mind was blown a little bit. You learn something new every day, isn't that neat? So as with the previously talked about Mad Monster Party, and most of the other Rankin Bass productions, as far as I'm aware, the script and the storyboards and all that kind of stuff were done stateside, and then the actual puppet animation was done by MOM Productions in Tokyo, in Japan. Now, sadly, this was another thing that I found out while I was researching this, because obviously nobody in 1964, when this came out, could predict what a cultural touchstone this Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer special would become for millions and millions of people around the world. Most of the puppets, they didn't save them, they weren't preserved because they just thought, oh, well, we're done chewing. They just chucked them or whatever, or took them home for their kids to play with or some shit like that. Now, a damaged Santa and Rudolph puppet did turn up on Antiques Roadshow back in 2005, at which point they were appraised for about 10 grand each. The puppets were actually restored later on by a company called Screen Novelties, but because the guy that owned the puppets at that time, whose name was Kevin Kreis, who was a big toy collector, he actually took them there to have them restored. And they were actually eventually auctioned off in 2020 and brought in a whopping $368,000 for just those two restored puppets. So just goes to show, nostalgia is a very, very powerful drug. So Rudolph, the Rudolph special, is very charmingly narrated by Burl Ives as an adorably rotund and little mustached snowman named Sam. So what this special is, it's essentially Rudolph's origin story. And it kind of takes the straightforward story from the poem/song and throwing in all kinds of fun details, to sort of embellish it a little bit. It's got little adventures in it. There's an elf that wants to be a dentist. There's a hardy prospector, on the hunt for riches. A kind of purgatorial island where all the unloved toys go, which is pretty fucking grim when you think about it, and a gigantic razor-toothed snow monster who's pretty dead set on munching our intrepid heroes. So there's also a really sweet love story, some pretty nasty bullying, not gonna lie, and kind of a positive message behind it all that even misfits and weirdos are good at something and maybe might be useful to have around once in a while, you know? So, I mean, that's a lot to process in a special that's only about 50 odd minutes long, which actually like blew my mind because I do watch this like quite often, but for some reason I was thinking that it was only half an hour long, but it's actually an hour. But in spite of all the stuff going on in it, it never really feels like overstuffed at all. Like I think all the elements work together really well, and they just kind of go all together into this concoction that's really like heartwarming and is like really genuinely funny that I think is just as winning today as it was back in the 1960s. So Rudolph gets born to the OG reindeer, Donner, and his wife, whose name is just Mrs. Donner. She didn't even get a name of her own. I thought that was pretty funny. So the parents are obviously like very proud of their child and everything like that. They said, oh, the kid's gonna grow up and pull Santa's sleigh one day. But then, obviously, that crazy red nose starts glowing, and Donner, the dad, reacts as though the kid sprouted a second head or announced he wasn't heterosexual or something like that. Like, he's not having it, you know what I mean? And then, like, Santa comes in to see the baby, and Santa's not really having it either. He's basically, like, agreeing with Donner that, yeah, that's a mutation, and it should be a source of shame and thus hidden from the world. He doesn't use those words, but that's kind of, like, the gist of what he's talking about. So Donner initially like scrapes up some mud from his hoof and like blackens the kid's nose, like cover it up. But he later actually forces him to wear like a black prosthetic nose that makes him kind of talk like he has a problem with his adenoid. So there's that. Now, while the nose is under wraps, Rudolph seems to do okay with his peers and even attracts the attention of a lovely young doe named Clarice one day when they're all at flying practice or reindeer games or whatever it is. But after was kind of like roughhousing with his friend named Fireball, the fake nose pops off and everybody gathers around to point and laugh at the freak. Even Fireball, who was like his best friend, and I mean, he just acts like he sees the nose and he just acts like Rudolph just shit in his mouth or something like that. It was just like, everybody is really, really overreacting to this fucking nose, you know what I mean? And they're just like, really, they don't even give a shit about like hurting his feelings or anything. So the reindeer coach, who is Comet, basically kicks Rudolph off the team, like, get out of here, you fucking freakazoid. Even though Rudolph actually flew better than any of the other noobs, but what if that doesn't matter, I guess, because he's a weirdo. So the only reindeer that's actually cool with the weird nose is Clarice, who tells him that the glowing red nose looks better than the fake one anyway, you know, because she's like, well, you talked funny with that other thing on, because everyone's a critic, you know what I mean? But then she does kind of say, she kind of softens it a little bit. It says, well, the fact that it's different is what makes it so awesome. So, you know, she's basically a good egg. Now, in spite of Clarice's understanding, though, Rudolph still feels like he doesn't belong, and he decides that he's going to run away. Now, meanwhile, at around the same time, at Santa's workshop, a very similar situation is unfolding for a darling little elf named Hermie, who, in very un-elf-like fashion, really isn't down with making toys and wants to be a dentist instead. Now, the elf foreman is just incredulous at this and just kind of like yells at him and barks at him and things like that. And he basically like threatens to can his little elfin ass if he doesn't straighten up and get on the toy making train like all the other elves. But Hermie is very despondent, singing about what a misfit he is. And he also decides that he's just gonna, you know, take this job and shove it. And he climbs out the window and decides he's gonna light out for the territories. So Rudolph and Hermie end up meeting up, like accidentally, and they resolve that they're going to be independent together. So they set out to find a place where they're just like free to let their freak flag fly and people will accept them for the way that they are. Now, on their journey, they also come across another guy who's kind of a loner but seems like more happy about it, and this is a prospector named Yukon Cornelius, who's out on his sledge looking for silver and gold. One of my very favorite things about this special, by the way, is when Yukon Cornelius hits his pickaxe into the ground and then lifts it up and licks the blade like he could taste whether there's treasure underneath the snow or not. I don't know why that always cracks me up so much, but it did, and it still does. I think it's like the little licking sound effect that it makes, but it's like, I don't know why. It's like ever since I was a kid, that's like just made me laugh every single time. So anyway, the trio doesn't get too far before they're menaced by the terrifying and yet painfully cute Bumble, the abominable snow monster, who has like these big, huge, massive fangs. And kind of like a cute little fuzzy butt. He's just like a fuzzy little. I have a little stuffed Bumble around here somewhere, but I can't remember where he went to. He's on one of these shelves someplace. So Yukon Cornelius has actually encountered this creature before. So they're able to escape by, getting on an ice, like piece of ice and then like chipping it off. So like drifting away on an ice floe because he's like, well, the Bumble can't swim. So they shore up on the island of Misfit Toys, which, true to its name, is a place where unwanted toys get sent to when they don't have a child that loves them. This was a concept that really, really upset me when I was a little girl. I'm sure like it really like upset a lot of kids, but I was like, I would get like really upset when I watched it. And the thing that bothered me a lot about, like most about it, I think, was that, well, I mean, just the whole concept of it is like pretty like sad for like a little kid. But another thing that bothered me was that the toys themselves looked perfectly fine. They didn't really look like misfits in any kind of like way that I could comprehend. Like, so the elephant has like speckles or like spots on him, or the Jack in the Box is named Charlie. Like, so what? Like, what's the big deal? Also, the little ragdoll girl, who, I didn't know this, but Wikipedia tells me is named Dolly for Sue, which, okay. What's wrong with her? Like, she looks okay to me. Like, she's cute as hell, in fact. And because she doesn't look like a misfit, this is another thing that I learned today. There has apparently long been fan speculation about why exactly Dolly Fursu ended up on the island. Because like I said, she doesn't have 3 arms or nothing like that. Like, what's the matter with her? So some people were like, well, maybe it's because she doesn't have a nose, or maybe she's just there because like the other toys were boys. So she was the token girl toy. So that's what makes her weird, is that she's the only girl or something like that. However, in 2007, I guess like not too long before he died, Arthur Rankin himself came out and seemed to solve the mystery when he confirmed, I don't know if he was totally serious about this, but he confirmed that Dolly Fursu was on the island not because of her appearance, but for psychological reasons, mainly depression because she had been abandoned, which I was like, that kind of makes a lot of sense, actually. I don't know if they did that on purpose back then or if they just weren't really thinking about it, but I'm like, I don't know. That's kind of cool, like in a sad, depressing way. I don't know why that like really struck me, but I just thought that was a really interesting, because that was something that I'd wondered about as a kid too. I'm like, well, what's wrong with that little baby doll? She looks fine. Actually, all of them look fine. So, like I said, the whole concept just really kind of upset me. So Rudolph and Hermie in particular are really jacked about finding this place because they think they found their place. It's like, here's all the other misfits, we can hang here. But the king of the island, who is a winged lion named Moonracer, because of course it is, tells them they can't stay there because technically they're not toys, which is pretty fucking harsh, I gotta say. I mean, talk about kicking a misfit when he's down. It's just like, hey, a place where we belong. Yeah, no, you don't belong here either, even though we're all misfits too. I'm like, that's fucked up. Now, Moonracer does actually let them stay overnight, though. And Rudolph, who's actually kind of moved by the plight of these poor toys, promises that he's going to go back and talk to Santa about finding all of these toys homes with loving children, which is really nice of him. I mean, you'd think that Santa would have done that before now. Like, you know what I mean? I have a lot of questions about the, like, whole fucking what's going on in the background of all of this operation, but I kind of feel like the Santa in this special, actually the Santa as he's portrayed in all these specials, he kind of like strikes me as a little bit of a grump. He's a little gruff, you know what I mean? And he seems like he's not real up on the fine details of his operation. Like he's just kind of like, what, where, who, you know what I mean? It's not like he's not that clueless, but it kind of seems like he just like, delegates that to others maybe. And I suspect that Mrs. Claus has been running the shit behind the scenes the whole time and never getting any credit for it, which, that's typical, really. So when Rudolph gets back to his home village, or whatever the hell a place where a bunch of reindeer live is called, he discovers that both his parents and Clarice are missing, because they actually, after he ran away, they went off into the wilds looking for him and they never returned. Now, so with the help of his friends, Rudolph sets out to find his lost family and his potential girlfriend, and he discovers that they've all been kidnapped by the Bumble, who is gonna snack on some reindeer meat this winter, if you catch my drift. So using a ruse, Cornelius is actually able to immobilize the Bumble, which allows Hermie to pull all of the monster's teeth out, which I was like, not cool, Hermie. What? Like, now the poor monster might starve to death. You guys are gonna have to just give him applesauce or some shit like that, or make him some like meat smoothies. I don't know. I mean, Bumble's got to eat too, you know. That seems like not cool, but anyway. So shortly after that, it seems like the lack of teeth actually becomes a moot point because Yukon Cornelius like pushes the Bumble off a mountain and then like falls over himself, which leads the whole gang to believe that they're both dead, which I was like, Jesus Christ, I kind of forgot how dark that was. I do watch this like pretty often, but I had forgotten about that aspect of it. But you know, it's fine. It turns out they're both okay. Bumbles bounce, that's what they say. You know what I mean? And not only that, but when Yukon Cornelius comes back, he's trained the now toothless Bumble to be a nice monster. So I guess he's a vegetarian now, I suppose. And the Bumble is even tall enough to put the star on top of the tree without needing a stepladder, which, you know, not sure what they're going to do with him the rest of the year. I mean, he's a big fella and he probably eats a lot and takes up a lot of room. So, you know, I'm just saying. So at this point, toward the end of the special, we finally get to the actual bit of the story that's laid out in the song. You know the drill. I mean, there's a horrible snowstorm that's evidently worldwide. I mean, must be in the middle of the ice age, I'm guessing. And it's kind of causing Santa to like consider canceling Christmas because he's like, look at that weather out there. I'm not going out in that shit. But then he realizes that if Rudolph and his glowing nose leads the reindeer team, then they'll be able to see just fine. So, I mean, again, I find it hard to believe that in all the years that Santa has been delivering gifts to good girls and boys, he's never thought to invest in a good set of high beams for the sleigh. But, you know, maybe he's just real old school, or I don't know. So yeah, Rudolph ends up being a hero, Misfit toys all get homes, and Hermie is allowed to open a dental clinic on the workshop premises, so everyone's happy. I was like, well, who took care of the elves' teeth before that? They just let their teeth like rot out their head, or I guess they don't even have like a medical clinic or anything. Maybe they don't need it. I guess like elves are magical. I don't know. Maybe that's why they thought the whole idea of an elf being a dentist was stupid, because they're like, bitch, we don't need dentists. We're elves. We're magic. Like, we don't, like, nothing bad will happen to our teeth. I don't really know. Like I said, I think about things too much, but that's kind of my deal. So I have to say, I mean, I love this special. Every bit as much as I did when I was a kid. All the songs are delightful. All the characters are delightful. And it's just like such a great adventure story. And it even has like the scary elements, like with the addition of the Bumble, who I really, really like. All the puppets are adorable. The voice work is great. It's very, very easy to see why this one is still a classic. Like all these years later, people still talk about it all this time later. So because Rudolph was such a hit, Rankin Bass decided to follow up with some more like holiday themed output. So in 1968, they released another stop motion feature called The Little Drummer Boy, which I sort of remember kind of vaguely, but it didn't stick with me as much because it was like way too Jesus-y for me, because I wasn't really into that. I mean, even as a kid, I was just kind of like, you know what I mean? I was like, I like the snow monster and the fucking talking reindeer and shit like that, you know what I mean? So then in 1969, they produced another, you know, stone cold classic with Frosty the Snowman, which wasn't stop motion, obviously, it was regular cell animation, but is still one of the most beloved of all of their animated specials, and one that, this is again another one that I watch pretty much every year. And then in 1970, they came out with Santa Claus is Coming to Town, which basically took the same framework and all the winning elements of the Rudolph special and applied it to Santa. So in other words, it kind of tells a fanciful origin story based on the popular Christmas song. So it's like, you know, this is how Santa like emerged, how he became Santa Claus, you know what I mean? Now, much like the Rudolph special, Santa Claus is Coming to Town starts with black and white newsreel footage and then segues into this special's narrator, who is human this time and not a talking snowman. The guy's name is Special Delivery S.D. Kluger, and he's a postman, and he's voiced by the legendary Fred Astaire. And it's his job to deliver all the letters that children write to Santa. Again, I don't know what he does the rest of the year. Maybe they give him a stipend and he just like does that one day a year, and then the rest of the year he just like lays on a beach in fucking Catalina. I don't really know. Now, at the beginning of the story, he's having a little mechanical trouble with his mail truck. So while he presumably waits for the North Pole equivalent of AAA, he regales us with the saga of how Santa, as well as various other Christmas traditions, like came to be. And no, it doesn't have anything to do with St. Nicholas or the winter solstice or Saturnalia or anything like that, like you might be thinking. Turns out the real story behind Christmas is that there's this dreary shithole called Sombertown, situated in some snow-choked corner of the world somewhere. Now, the city is ruled over by the perpetually frowning tyrant named Burgermeister Meisterburger, which I had forgotten about that. And when they said it, I just like fucking busted out laughing. So Burgermeister Meisterburger is voiced by Paul Frees, who actually does a bunch of voices in this, not just this one. And his bevy of jackbooted thugs who all talk with German accents and wear a variation on that spiked helmet, like that German spiked helmet from World War One. So, So, although this is probably the last place you would want to raise a child, somebody leaves a baby on the doorstep of the Burgermeister's house. A little red-headed infant whose only identifying item is a little note that says Claus on it. So the Burgermeister, naturally, is not having it, and he tells his right-hand man, who's Grimly, who's also voiced by Paul Frees, to get rid of the brat by taking him to some faraway orphanage, even though it's the middle of a snowstorm. So the baby gets blown away in the blizzard, but is luckily rescued by some kindly woodland animals who hide the child from this special's Bumble equivalent, a scary wizard called the Winter Warlock, who's actually voiced by Keenan Wynn, of all people. So once the danger has passed, the critters leave the kid in a much more favorable situation, giving him to a family of elves called the Kringles, who obviously name the baby Chris with a K. Turns out that before, I guess before the fascist takeover of Sombertown, as far as that goes, the elves used to be toy makers to the king. So like known the world over for like how awesome their toys were. Matter of fact, the elves still make toys constantly, I guess because they can't help themselves, because that's just how elves do. But because they don't have anywhere to distribute them, the toys just kind of like pile up in the yard, like on an episode of Hoarders. So years later, when a grown Kris Kringle, who's actually voiced by Mickey Rooney, decides to see if he can jumpstart the toy-making business again by delivering product to the nearest city, which is Sombertown, but he runs into a little bit of a snag. See, everyone in Sombertown is oppressed and miserable and forced to work day and night and never have any fun. So, just like most people's lives, I guess. So because the Burgermeister actually tripped on a toy once, I think it was a toy duck, he very rashly bans all toys within the city limits or whatever, and he just plasters posters everywhere declaring anyone found with a toy will be thrown in the dungeon, which seems a little bit draconian to say the least. So Kris Kringle and his new sidekick, which is a penguin named Topper that he met along the way, he comes across two kids in the town square who are washing their stockings, because that's one of the things that the Burgermeister is really, really a stickler about, is everybody has to have super clean stockings at all times. I guess he does spot checks or whatever. So Kris Kringle gives these two kids some toys, not, unaware of the law in this town. But before they can even start to play with them, they're stopped by their stern but smoking hot teacher, Miss Jessica. Now, Chris, who is just kind of undeterred by this whole situation, gives Miss Jessica one of the toys that he has, which is a China doll. And she actually kind of warms toward him, seduced by the power of toys, as we all can be. But then, of course, the Burgermeister shows up to poop in everyone's cornflakes, and he just orders that the kids and everybody just be arrested. Just arrest everybody. This is all against the law. So Kris Kringle is able to momentarily distract him by giving him a yo-yo, which he actually happily plays with until Grimly, his little right-hand man, reminds him about his own law. But by the time that the Burgermeister comes back to his senses, Kris Kringle and the penguin have already fucking taken off. So then it's kind of out of the frying pan and into the fire, it seems, because no sooner have the pair kind of hightailed it into the wilderness than they're captured by the Winter Warlock. Now, his threat, though, is almost immediately neutralized when Chris gives him a toy train, and this completely, dissolves a presumed lifetime of evil in just one fell swoop. I mean, that is some toy train. Wouldn't it be nice if it was really that easy? He's like, here's a toy. Calm the fuck down. But yeah, it's it was kind of like that. Now, granted, the Winter Warlock does admit that he's a terrible person at heart still, and that this suddenly nice because of a toy thing might be temporary. He's not entirely sure. But, at least seems cognizant of his own limitations, which, that's a step in the right direction, I reckon. So the only downside to losing his evil, though, is that apparently most of his magic went with it for some reason. And that doesn't really seem like a fair trade-off, in my opinion, but whatever. So the warlock brings Chris and Miss Jessica back together. And Jessica tells Chris that the Burgermeister actually burned all the toys in the town square in front of the children. And I was like, God damn, that is one cold motherfucker. Jesus Christ. So now all the kids want new ones because, fuck the laws, man. They don't give a shit. They just want toys. Now, Chris is totally down to subvert the man in Sombertown. But the Burgermeister attempts to thwart him by basically forcing everybody in the city to lock all their doors and windows, at which point Chris is kind of like trying to like work around shit. So he starts sneaking in through the chimneys and leaving toys in the kids' stockings so that the Burgermeister can't see him or see the toys. You know what I mean? So didn't you always wonder how that tradition started? Well, now you know. So Chris and Topper, the penguin, eventually get captured, like they wander into a trap or whatever, and the spike-helmeted soldiers also haul in the Winter Warlock and the entire Kringle elf family. They're just like rounding up everybody, Jesus Christ. And they kind of just throw them all in the pokey. Now, Jessica tries to reason with the Burgermeister, but his power mad ass is not budging. So Jessica decides that she's going to go be in prison, like in solidarity with her friends, right? So the warlock is like lamenting that he can't do more to help them, having lost his magic and all. But then he does remember, oh, you know what? I think I might have a little leftover magic left. And it happens to be a handful of magical seed corn that will allow reindeer to fly. Which seems like a very specific magical ingredient to have kind of hanging out in your pockets. But okay, who am I to judge? I don't know. So some reindeer eat the corn, and the gang all jump on the reindeer, and they fly away. And then, because Kris Kringle is now a fugitive, he decides he's going to grow a beard, so he's not as recognizable, and he's going to go back to his original foundling name of Claus in order to hide from the authorities. I mean, who knew that Santa's backstory would involve so much crime? Not me, that's for sure. So anyhow, Claus and Jessica get married, and then they hide out in the North Pole, where they start construction on their house and their large toy manufacturing facility, which will one day take over the world. So time passes, Claus and Jessica get older, their hair turns white and everything like that. And though for a while, I guess, they had been delivering toys whenever they got a letter from a child asking for one, you know what I mean? Which, holy crap, that's a lot of work. Eventually, it all became too much, not surprisingly. And Claus had to limit his toy distribution journeys to once a year on Arbor Day. Just kidding. On Christmas Eve. So at some point, like in the ensuing years, the Burgermeister in Sombertown dropped dead. Good riddance, probably from a rage stroke. And the residents overturned the stupid laws concerning toy ownership. No word, though, on whether they changed the name of the city to Happy Town or painted the buildings a color other than gray. So the Winter Warlock got his magic back somehow. And he vowed to give everyone a white Christmas, except for the half of the world that's in the southern hemisphere. And then also Claus's legend spread far and wide, ultimately leading to him earning an informal saint status, hence the Santa Claus. And there you have it, the true story of Santa Claus with some artistic license for dramatic effect. So this is also a pretty great special. It doesn't have quite the level of magic that the Rudolph one does, maybe because pretty much all the characters in this one are humans and, are therefore not as interesting, like as talking reindeer or elves or snow monsters or whatever. I feel like the songs are not quite as fun and not quite as memorable. I mean, they're still pretty good, but they seem like they're more slow and schmaltzy kind of thing. They don't really have like a lot of the upbeat numbers. Not surprisingly, the best one, other than the classic title song, obviously, is the one sung by the villains. You know what I mean? One thing that made me simultaneously like crack up and also cringe at the same time was the song that Kris Kringle sang at one point, which is the title of it is actually Be Prepared to Pay, which sounds a little bit ominous, but it also goes under an alternate title, If You Sit on My Lap Today, which sounds even more ominous. I mean, the less said about that, the better. I mean, overall, though, this one is still like another holiday staple from my childhood. And I mean, watching it again really brought back like a flood of memories, since I actually hadn't seen this one in several years. Unlike the Rudolph special, which I watch almost every year. I don't think I've seen it for 2 or 3 years at this point, but I've watched it like a lot more recently than I watched Santa Claus is Coming to Town, though. So the last of the big three stop motion specials that I fondly remember from Christmases past was actually first broadcast in 1974 and is called The Year Without a Santa Claus. Now, it was always like extra special when I caught this one because I feel like it didn't get repeated as much. I mean, the Rudolph one, they would play it like several times a year when I was a kid. But this one, it's like, it seemed like they only played it once, and if you missed it, you were kind of fucked, you know what I mean? You just didn't get to see it that year. And I have to say, I really like this one too because I was very delighted by the Snow Miser and Heat Miser characters. So the addition of those two characters and the inclusion of a few more of like this being funnier and having like a few more upbeat songs in it than the last one did, made this one kind of like a little more fun, like jollier kind of experience than Santa Claus Coming to Town was, which as much as I like Santa Claus is Coming to Town, it seems like it's the most serious of the three. Like pretty much almost all the songs are not downbeat, but they're like slower and it's almost like a more serious tone. There's not as much comedy in it as there are in the other two. So The Year Without a Santa Claus was actually based on a 1956 book by a Pulitzer Prize winning poet and children's author named Phyllis McGinley. And the story is told as kind of like a flashback by Mrs. Claus, who's voiced by Shirley Booth. She's kind of telling us about this real shitty Christmas season that took place years back, like before you were born. They never like specify how long ago it was. So basically, Santa, who's voiced by Mickey Rooney again in this one, he wakes up, we're led to presume like a few days before Christmas, and he is just a grouchy, whiny, hypochondriac mess. I mean, his back hurts, his knees hurt, he has gout, I think somebody says at some point. Like, he's exhausted. And he also, on top of all of that, he has like a really, really bad cold, and he just does not want to get the fuck out of bed. So Mrs. Claus summons the doctor, who's very, very curmudgeonly, and he basically advises Santa, he's like, you need to stay in bed and just skip all that Christmas nonsense for a change because you're like wearing yourself out. Now, Santa initially protests this, but the doctor assures him, hey, look, nobody gives a shit about you or about Christmas anymore anyway. Which is, you know, that's nice. And so eventually, like, Santa buys into this and he's persuaded to just fucking slack and say to hell with the holidays. I'm staying in fucking bed. So Mrs. Claus is unable to rouse Santa from his grumpy self-pity. And so at first she considers dressing up as Santa herself and doing his job for him. Like, she sings an entire song about it. I will say she probably could have pulled it off, but she ultimately decides against doing this. And she proposes instead that a couple of the elves, whose names are Jingle and Jangle Bells, voiced by Bob McFadden and Bradley Bulkey, respectively, they fly with the baby reindeer Vixen down to the world at large to see if they can find some remnants of Christmas spirit that will convince Santa that people still appreciate him and the holiday as a whole, kind of thus giving him the incentive to do his Christmas rounds as usual. Well, the elves, because, not gonna lie, they're kind of idiots, they pretty much immediately run into trouble. So they get on the wrong side of the Miser brothers. You got the Snow Miser, who's voiced by Dick Shawn. He's the winter guy, obviously, and he controls all the weather in the northern climes. While you got the Heat Miser, who's voiced by George S. Irving, obviously likes to, he's in charge of like all the hot places, so he likes everything like really sweltering. I will note here that because I grew up in Florida, where I actually still live, we usually had to run the air conditioning on Christmas Day, like pretty much every year. So I think when I saw this special, I saw the Heat Miser as even more of a villain than he's actually portrayed in the special, as I kind of felt like he was personally responsible for me sweating my ass off every Christmas. Instead of being bundled up in a sweater with a cup of hot chocolate in front of a big roaring fire, like while it snowed outside, just like in all the cool Christmas movies. I mean, I really felt cheated by having a hot Florida Christmas, in other words, and I'm still like pretty bitter about it even to this day. So the Misers tried to shoot down the elves and end up kind of like shooting lasers at each other and shit like that, because of course they do. But Vixen is able to save their bacon. And since they don't really know where they are, they figure, oh, whatever, like anywhere is fine. All they have to do, after all, is find somebody somewhere who still believes in Santa and the magic of Christmas cheer and all that bullshit, so they can just like find them and then go home. So they end up in this place called Southtown, and there's really not that many people around, so they're just like walking down the street. But then they immediately get written up by a cop for wearing weird clothes, which is, I guess, illegal here, and riding around on an unauthorized animal. So they get all kind of like, yeah, they're already like getting in trouble. Now, to hide the fact that Vixen is a reindeer, they actually put socks over her antlers and they pretend she's a dog. But sadly, the hot weather isn't doing poor little Vixen any favors. She gets noticeably sicker as like the elves are trying to like go about. They keep like sticking her in the shade, like under the tree, and she's just like, you know what I mean? She's getting all, I mean, I feel her pain. I feel that way in warm weather too. She's getting like all fucking woozy and shit. Now, unfortunately, due to her disguise, Vixen is actually picked up by the dog catcher and taken to the animal shelter. Now, meanwhile, back up in the North Pole, Santa has rolled his lazy ass out of bed finally and discovered that Jingle, Jangle, and Vixen are gone. And that actually lights a fire under his ass because he's worried that they'll get hurt down there in this horribly cruel world that doesn't give a shit about Santa Claus anymore. So he jumps on another reindeer and kind of flies down there to find him. Back in Southtown, the elves actually approach a group of kids who are out playing. Now, the kids actually seem nice enough. They're not like bullies or assholes or anything like that, but they all claim that they're just way too old to believe in Santa Claus. Not long after that, Santa himself arrives in town, although he's being like incognito, like he tells everybody that his name is like Mr. Klaus. So he actually approaches one of the children from earlier, who's like this little redheaded kid named Iggy. And he's like, oh yeah, I saw the people that you're asking about. Like, he didn't say they were elves, but you know what I mean? He described them, and he's just like, oh yeah, I saw those two weirdos earlier on. And he's like, I think they went to the animal shelter to try to get Vixen back or something. Now, inside the boy's house, Santa actually meets Iggy's parents, who both say that they do still believe in Santa Claus, which cheers Santa Claus up considerably. And after he sings this whole song about it, the tearful Iggy is also convinced to believe in Santa Claus, which duh, because he's like sitting right there in front of you. Although he doesn't like realize until a few minutes later that that's actually Santa Claus. So Santa actually, like, he marches down to the animal shelter and springs Vixen out of there. And he, you know, I thought this was actually, like, pretty cool. Santa was like, well, I can't wait to, like, help the elves because Vixen is, like, really sick. And they imply that she might die. They don't say that, but that's kind of, like, what the implication is. So, like, we need to take her back to the North Pole immediately because this hot weather shit is, like, not agreeing with her. And I'm just like, yeah, you get her the fuck out of here. So Santa, like, takes her back and said, I'll come back and worry about the elves later on. Now, in the meantime, Iggy and the elves go to see the mayor of Southtown, who just laughs his ass off at their ridiculous story about Santa being real. Now, because they're so earnest, though, the mayor says, tell you what, just jokingly, if you can use your elfin magic to make it snow in Southtown, which he's like, it hasn't done that in like 100 years, then he's going to call all the other mayors in the country, which would take a while, damn, and get them to declare a national legal holiday for Santa. So the elves are like, yeah, we can do that. Let's do that shit. So we got a deal. So they actually get Mrs. Claus on board, and she goes to see the snow miser to see what they can do about the White Christmas situation. Now, he's actually pretty friendly and he's happy to help, but when they tell him that they want it to snow in Southtown, he's like, oh, no. It's like, I can't fucking do that. He's like, my stepbrother, the heat miser, that's his territory. So you'll have to clear it with him, and that's just not going to fly. I know that that's not going to work out. So not surprisingly, when they go see the heat miser, he, predictably flips the fuck out. He's like, he just doesn't want to give a single inch. He already feels like he gets the short end of the stick because Santa likes winter better. And so he just like sees this as unfair. Like he's literally like the redheaded stepchild of this whole situation. Now, they do kind of eventually like talk to him down. He says, okay, I tell you what, I will agree to let it snow in Southtown on Christmas Day on one condition, that the heat miser gets to let it be warm in the North Pole. Now, the snow miser, of course, does not want to do that shit either. So Mrs. Claus, basically, they're just like squabbling, and she's like, look, I'm just going to go right the fuck over your heads. So she goes to their mom, who is Mother Nature, and she goes there. They have a nice little tea and everything like that to kind of arbitrate between the two boys and reach a compromise. So finally, they work it out where it can snow on the big day in Southtown, like for one day, and then the heat miser can have like one warm spring day in the North Pole. Everybody's happy, except I presume for all the poor cold-adapted animals in the North Pole that will probably die of heat stroke. Merry Christmas. Just kidding. It's only an animated special. None of the animals died that we know of. But yeah. And so, because the elves made good on their promise to make it snow in Southtown, the mayor calls everybody, like he said, and I guess that's one powerful mayor. So they get a national holiday for Santa established, like presumably in a day or two. So everybody in the goddamn world agrees to give Santa a day off and let him enjoy Christmas for a change instead of him like having to bring Christmas to everybody else. And so like all the kids in the world actually make or buy presents for him or just write letters telling him how much they love him if they can't like afford to do anything more than that. No word on what the kids that couldn't afford paper, pens, or stamps did, but you know, we're not thinking about that. So Santa is just so overwhelmed and reinvigorated by this outpouring of love and Christmas spirit that he decides he's going to shake off his aches and pains and illnesses, his gout, and he hops back in the sleigh to fulfill his Christmas obligations just like always. So Christmas is saved. So I'm going to say, though, that technically this wasn't really a year without a Santa Claus at all. It was more like the year that Santa guilted everyone into compliance by essentially like threatening to take his ball and go home. But I guess that title was like too long. I didn't actually know this until I was doing research for this video, but there was a stop motion sequel to this called A Miser Brothers Christmas, and it was released in 2008. Mickey Rooney and George S. Irving, who at that point were both in their 80s, they actually reprised their roles as Santa and the Heat Miser, respectively. Though, you know, obviously the other original voice actors had to be replaced because the rest of them had died in the ensuing years because, you know, it was a long time ago. I haven't actually heard anything about whether this special is any good or not, but I actually do really like the Miser characters, like both their voices and their general design. So, you know, maybe this is something I'd be interested in watching in the future. If any of you guys have seen it, like, let me know if it's worth watching because, you know, like I said, I really do like those two characters, and I'm interested to see what they did what they did with the concept, like in a more modern setting. So, I mean, I've always been a big fan of stop motion animation, just as a general art form. So these specials will always have like a huge place in my heart, even aside from all the, you know, just warm feelings of nostalgia that they inevitably invoke, like whenever I watch them. I'm gonna say I still think that they're still as charming and as fun today as they were when they first came out. So it doesn't really surprise me at all that they've remained in so many people's, you know, Christmas viewing rotations like this many decades later. I mean, Rudolph is still easily the best one, but I mean, they're all absolutely worth watching. And it was like, I really had a good time like revisiting them for this video. So that will do it for this holiday installment of the Scare Salon. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please tell me in the comments, what do you watch every Christmas or every holiday, whatever holiday it is that you celebrate. And please, whatever it is that you celebrate, please have a happy, safe holiday, and I will see you guys again on the next one. Bye.